And you thought having sand in your boots was bad. Here's a look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, DC Rebirth, Clayface, Batman, and Batwoman. This multi-pack includes 3 iconic characters, the shape-shifting villain Clayface, the fierce hero Batwoman, and the ever-determined Batman, all portrayed in their distinctive designs from the Rebirth comics. Just before things in this review start to take shape, let's take the tape measure though and see how tall the DC Rebirth Batman, Clayface, and Batwoman actually stands. A set that I've sat on for a while, not actually having it in part of my collection, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to even spend the money considering that these are essentially just recolors of figures we've already gotten before. Sure enough though, Amazon, as they always seem to have been lately, marked down the price of this down to $57. And $57 for all 3 figures, I think that was an absolute steal. Now let's go ahead and take the tape measure. Now Batman and Clayface are figures we've both gotten before. Batwoman, not really too sure of. I thought she was going to be using a mold of another figure, and then when I kind of compared her with those figures, sure enough, it wasn't the case at all. But at least for Batman, we're going to start with things measuring with him first. Batman is going to be at 6 3/4 inches in height, translating though to a figure that's 16.5 centimeters tall. Batwoman's about the same, so I'm probably not going to, I'm going to skip over the measuring of her. But we're going to jump, though, to Clayface, who clearly is the biggest of the 3. He is, in fact, actually, if we flip it around first to inches, 8 3/4 inches in height, or about 21.5 centimeters tall. As for comparing, let's start with the big boy first. We're going to just move over Batwoman here for a second. Actually, we'll just kind of put her down here for a second. Going to slide over Clayface. So this is the one that we got from the 3-pack, obviously. This is the original Clayface. Now, right away, one thing that's ever apparent is the fact that they're clearly using the same mold, but the paint is so much brighter here on the 3-pack release. Again, the head sculpts are going to be exactly the same. Don't worry. We're going to kind of cover off all the bases when it comes down to him individually. And then as for Batman, now this is a recolor, though, of the original DC Rebirth Batman. I'm just going to put him right over here. We did also essentially get that same mold again, although it was a different head sculpt. He was part of the McFarlane Toys digital release. And yes, I've already looked at reviews of those as well. Still, though, again, like Batwoman seems to be the odd woman out this time. Again, like while I was looking at the body, I'm sure like the torso, the arms, and the legs have probably been borrowed over from other bodies before, but I can't quite pinpoint exactly which figure she's actually copying things from. Speaking of copying things from, I'm sure we've also copied over some of these accessories also as well. Batman and Batwoman both come included with both grapple lines. I would imagine this probably being Batman's, this behind him probably being belonging to Batwoman, but they're only cast here in black plastic. So unfortunately, though, none of the budget went into actually painting any of like the rope or the hook for that matter. These can be attached into inside of the hands. Funny though enough is that Batwoman's hand is on this side to grip this, and then Batman's will be on the adjacent side to hold his grapple line. What's also rather interesting, though, is that they also come included with batarangs. Not that that's the interesting part, but I'm sure already you can see. What was the problem with the coloring of this? If you look at Batman's batarang, for example, it starts somewhat normal with gold on this side, and then for reasons unknown, it goes progressively into a darker finish on this side. It's almost like if something had been sitting inside the tray and they were going over and painting other pieces, and then unfortunately not realizing they inadvertently sprayed some of the black paint on top of this side too. It maybe isn't as obvious, though, with Batman's. It's certainly a lot more obvious with, I'm guessing, the Batwoman's batarang. You can see, though, it looks like something Clayface or Two-Face would belong to, because, again, like half of this is all black. The other half here is gold. See if I can actually hold it without dropping it. There you go. Doesn't it kind of just look like somebody was spraying the one side, or maybe spraying stuff over off to the side here, and not realizing that some of the spray was ending up over on the accessories here? It's strange. I mean, it kind of even looks like it's burnt, but I don't know. I don't think it's burnt. It's probably just, again, like paint problems. Either way, though, again, like the accessories, if you're looking at Batman alone, he only has one gripping hand on this side of his body. So right away, that tells you which side is going to be holding the accessories. So, of course, you can take the bat line, you put that into his hand. Or you can also take the batarang. And again, the batarang, as burnt as it may look, you can go ahead and fit that into his hand as well. Let's move that off to the side. As for, though, Batman, we've already looked at the fact and established that this is essentially just the Rebirth Batman. Like, if you're looking copy to copy and just color changes, this would be the closest one to borrow things from. Same body, same head sculpt, clearly. Then the only difference then, if I can actually hold these guys, when we did get the McFarlane Toys digital release, while it was using, though, the same body, they gave him a brand new head sculpt. In fact, I may have even mentioned in his review that he was using the same head sculpt. That would be incorrect information. I provided incorrect information. Sorry for that. But let's go like to like, apples to apples, bats to bats. Yeah, again, like the head sculpt is the same, though. But I will say, though, like the coloring that they gave for Batman's face is a whole lot nicer. The original Batman was fine. I mean, like, I still like the coloring for his costume, but he was a little more paler, though, in complexion. The new Batman, though, while still using the same mold, I do think like the paint is handled a lot nicer here, especially around his lips. If you, though, prefer the coloring of the darker gray, the lighter gray may be a little jarring to you. I think the gray works really well. I don't know if I would say it still is a better use of this mold. I like the darker gray, to be honest, especially the outline of the bat emblem. The yellow works, I think, a little bit better with the darker gray. That's just personal opinion. Again, the utility belts are exactly the same. The gauntlet's the same. And also even like the cape. If you look at the back of the cape, I mean, short of maybe that one is a little shinier than the other. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to see if there's anything different between the two molds. The purple also works really well on the interior of the cape here too. I think it's just a really nice looking mold. I've never really had any issues at all really with the Rebirth Batman. I just like the color scheme working a little bit better here in this figure. Like, things seem to pop a lot more on him, even though I do like the darker gray on the original release of him. Again, when you got down below here, you got the bat logos here for his kneecaps. That's a fun little touch, especially if he's kneecapping some guy. I imagine that would probably just go and hit them right in the face. Ouch, that would hurt. The sculpting on the boots are exactly the same as well, and he's going to retain all the same levels of posability, which is, that's going to rotate on a ball joint, allows the head to rotate all the way around. Head's going to look up, whoops, head's going to look up, head's going to look down, and yes, you can move it back and forth as well. The upper torso, in fact, is going to be on a ball joint. The lower abdomen area is also on a ball joint. The arms go forward and back. I mean, you would be normally able to rotate this all the way around, but the pesky cape, that pesky cape, seems just to get in the way of things. This guy can also go in a T pose, so you can get a 90-degree angle bend on the arms. He has a swivel there at the bicep, a double hinge on the elbow, yes, and the hands rotate all the way around. Batman's legs split the same. Of course, he's got the ratchet joints inside the thighs. Do we ever need to get that close to Batman's groin? The answer is yes. Yes, we do. Forward and back on the legs, there's a swivel, of course, on the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee. No articulation here for the boot, sad to say. But he does have ankle articulation. He does also have ankle rockers. And would you believe, the figure does also have toe articulation as well. So, yes, same Batman, essentially, though, just with some cosmetic changes. Many would still prefer to go with the darker gray. I do really think the dark gray is probably the best use of this mold, but the lighter gray does things pretty good as well. Still don't understand, though, why his accessories look as dark as they do, and only really on one side of his body, one side of it as well. So there's Batman. Just going to get him to stand here. Moving things on to Batwoman, which again is more of the mystery than anything else. Which is funny I say that because there was the animated movie, Mystery of the Batwoman. While she is a mystery certainly of what mold they've used, I think the head sculpt is okay. She is probably the most unique figure of this set. I don't think we've gotten really, in fact, any Batwomen figures, have we? I know we've got certainly lots of Batgirls. And speaking of Batgirls, like looking at this mold, I thought, first of all, I was looking at a Batwoman mold or Batgirl mold. The cape is one of the things that was kind of the giveaway as well as the utility belt. Yet I've gone and looked at the Three Jokers Batgirl. It's not that. I've also looked at the Cassandra Cain Batgirl. No, it's not that either. No, none that I can see. Even the build-up figure, the build-up Batmobile Batwoman, Batgirl, doesn't seem to borrow any of the accessories. Maybe it borrows some of the molds. Like maybe I'm sure the legs have been used, the arms have been used. The utility belt does seem, though, different. Clearly, though, the head is completely different as well. She's a little on the pale side, but I do think like the Batwoman head sculpt is really good. Unfortunately, though, with the way that they've sculpted the hair, it's a little on the brighter side, but it does mean that there's going to be more limitations when it comes to rotating their head back and forth. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Soft, good cape, so we're not using the fabric capes just yet. That's going to be coming a little bit later. If I was to jump into a time machine, I would be telling myself back then, when the set first came out, don't worry, these guys are going to eventually be released in fabric capes. But I guess I'm kind of in the present time. It doesn't really matter, does it? I keep getting confused with time jumping. Again, like the colors for the red work really well. I mean, they're kind of more of like a ketchup red, very bright orangish red. They probably could have just toned that down just a little bit and made it a little bit more of a darker red. But I think the colors overall are pretty good on Batwoman here. The sculpting down below here again, I just feel like I'm looking at something I've seen before, and I'm drawing an absolute blank. Even like Huntress, I thought, oh, maybe they're using some of the elements from Huntress. Maybe, again, like some of the arms, maybe some of the leg elements, but there's a lot of, I'm guessing, new tooling that's went into this figure. The articulation, though, is pretty much going to be the same as most Batwomen, though. Batgirls and Batwomen alike will have still a head swivel, although you're going to be a little bit more, again, limited because of the way they've sculpted the hair. It flows to the side, which does look pretty, but unfortunately it's going to limit a lot of what you can really do with the head sculpts. As for the arms, again, you still got that T-pose. The arms rotate realistically all the way around. Again, you got yourself a swivel in the bicep, double hinge on the elbow, and the hands, again, yeah, rotate all the way around. I know you were following along with me. Somebody's checking off their list. Okay, torso, you're going to go next. Waist, right? Waist, ball joint. Yeah, you're right. Upper torso, ball joint. Lower abdomen, ball joint. Legs, again, split on ratcheted joints. You can take the legs and move them forward. Yeah, move them back. And you're going to have a little bit of a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Not much. I don't want to really commit to the idea of saying that this is more of a ball joint or something that is intended as a swiveling point to the leg. It's just the way it works. It's the way it's been assembled. You get a little bit of a wiggle. Just a little bit of a wiggle. The legs don't have any swivel cut. I actually thought there would be a little cut right there, but you can't turn anything going on there for the legs. She does still manage to pull off a double hinge in the knee. No articulation again for the boots. Ankle articulation, yes. And if you're checking off your checklist, would you have an ankle rocker? Yeah, you would have an ankle rocker. Bingo! And of course, you got yourself the toe articulation as well. Get a good gander at the bottoms of her feet. Oh, all in all, though, one thing that's also you probably have already noticed so far, and I didn't leave these off at all, none of this set, by the way, does come included with display stands or trading cards for that matter. Normally, when we get a 2-pack, how often do we get ourselves a 3-pack? But even then, you would get usually like a display stand, 2 of them probably for each of the characters, or obviously one of them for each of the characters, and you get yourself a trading card. None of that get actually included with a set at all. So let's go ahead and move Batwoman out of the way. We'll move Batman out of the way. I think it's safe to say we've covered off the territory for that, right? Right? Okay. So let's slide over Clayface once again. We'll bring back in the original Clayface. And I will say that this is one thing that really is probably the one nicest aspects of this set is the fact we get a much colorful looking Clayface. The bodies are, as you probably can already see, exactly the same to one another. The only thing that they really have done is taken sort of the monotone coloring of the brown that they with the initial release of him and splashed a lot more color on this guy. The browns basically, if you're looking at kind of the basics of his body, and in fact probably the easiest way to look at this, if you look at the back of his body, it seems to be the one place, unfortunately, that no paint has found its way to. Even if you look at the back of this guy, you can see like he's got a much darker grayish brown. This guy gets a little bit more of a chocolate brown. But unfortunately, though, while it's so left off on the back of his body, he gets a lot more of it, though, certainly when you're looking at it from the front. The eyes and head sculpt, for that matter, are going to be the exact same. So again, there's the original one. Eyes would have been, what, I'm guessing like a beige for the eyes, beige for teeth. The thing that I like about the new Clayface, though, is that they've changed the colors so the teeth aren't the same color as his eyes. So his eyes now are nice, bright, yellowish orange. The teeth are still kind of gnarly. He's got some summer teeth. Some are there, some are not. But again, like I do like the fact that they've actually painted the teeth a different color than the rest of his eyes. The mouth does open the exact same way. Oh, hello. So you can see how gnarly he looks on the inside of his mouth. Yeah, obviously the original Clayface would have also had that as well. Bodies are the same, sculpting is the same, but again, there's a lot more opportunity, I feel, for some of the cooler little finer features of this figure to really stand out when you add a secondary wash to it, especially when you add a paint that's a different contrast to the darker brown that he already had on his body. So things like his faces, for example. See all the cool faces that he's got sculpted on his shoulders? He's got that on the front of his body there as well. I mean, spot how many faces you can find on Clayface's body. We don't need to turn that into a game at all. But he's got that all basically on the front of his body, this nice lighter brown. It's not everywhere, unfortunately. So again, like, unfortunately, it's missed here on the under, like his armpit area. I wouldn't probably recommend getting that close to the Clayface's armpit. And it certainly is, unfortunately, overlooked altogether on the back of his body. But where he has it, at least, he's got it on his lower legs. He's certainly got a lot more of it there on the front of his body. The original Clayface, if I just put this guy down here for a second, he was, construction-wise, a very hollow figure. Hollow in the torso. Knock, knock, who's there? And again, like, certainly when it comes to his construction of his arms, just close that mouth for a second. When it came to his arms, you really did feel like he stayed together well enough, but you can definitely feel like when you're rotating arms around and stuff, there's a lot more of an echo-ness coming from the cavity of his body. Well, unfortunately, though, they haven't changed anything at all to the Clayface. The new one still has that. In fact, I actually noticed, though, with his arms, Not that they're looser, but I feel like when I am moving them around, it reminds me ever more apparently that the figure, yeah, does have a hollow body. Knock, knock, who's there? So again, like when it comes to his articulation, it seems like his arms are a little on the looser side. I mean, if I was to say bring his arms out, give him what, like the closest thing to a T-pose, that's kind of unsettling. He holds it well enough. Like, it's not the fact that his shoulders are so loose that his arms immediately drop, but I do feel like there's a little bit of looseness starting to develop on the figure. Again, for the articulation on this guy, if you're familiar with this guy, you'll be familiar with the opposability on this guy as well. Stop that. So again, like for his head's only going to rotate forward and back. There is a little bit, and I say a little bit, about that much, movability with what you can actually get for Clayface's head. My guess is it's probably a post, and then there's a ball joint on the end of it. So that basically just is only going to give the figure posability in the sense that you can move the head forward and back, or I should say back and forth. Very little though, very little up and down. Still, again, like the arms do rotate all the way around. You know, the one thing that's interesting about Clayface though is not the fact that I have a harder time to rotate his arm. I mean, that hasn't changed at all. But if you ever had collected, and this is a stretch, if you ever collected the original 80s in humanoid toys, and you had yourself Decompose. The plastic and the way that I move the figure, and why am I waving my finger around so much? The way that I move the figure around and the hollowness I hear while I'm doing it reminds me of the original 80s Decompose. There you go. But again, like the arms rotate all the way around. Again, you've got somewhat of a serviceable T-pose. Now, with the arms, unfortunately, though, you're only going to get a single hinge. And if you blinked it, you would have missed it. That's as much as you can actually do with his arms. So they hinge out about that far, and they hinge in. Not a fully straight arm, nor nearly would be a 90-degree angle bend in the elbow. The hands rotate. They're also on hinge joints. There's not much really that you can really do with the hands. You can rotate them, but I kind of feel like I wanted to start separating a lobster here. The hands, again, rotate back and forth, but there's a lot of things kind of getting in the way of me actually being able to do that properly. The upper torso is going to be on what would you call a ball joint? Very, very subtly a ball joint. What's interesting, though, is the mid-abdomen area. His tummy tum-tum is softer plastic. You can squeeze it in if you want. I don't know if that's going to cause friction problems down the road, that's going to start to split the plastic right here. It hasn't certainly happened so far in this version of Clayface. Let's knock on plastic that it's not going to happen on this guy either. The waist swivels, but only just a little bit. The legs split out on ratchet joints again. Take the legs, yeah, moving forward and back. A little bit of a swivel there. Hinge certainly in the knee, but again, not much you can do with it. There's a swivel there at the lower leg. And there's not really much, again, you can do with the feet. The feet are basically just tree trunks sculpted into a continuation for the rest of the lower legs. So again, like Clayface, if you like maybe the mold and you miss the fact that he didn't have nearly enough color, the new Clayface does colors a little bit better. The hollowness of his body is still ever very apparent. I still don't really love the head sculpt on these. I mean, a lot of times, again, like while he does have posability in his mouth, most of the time when I displayed this guy, I usually had the mouth closed, or as close to closed as I could get this, just because I like the smaller face just a little bit more. Again, for this set, I guess the most unique figure in this release is probably the Batwoman. The Batman, again, we've already gotten before, but I do like the lighter colors of the gray. It works really well for this particular mold. And the fact, we can't overlook the fact that this set was selling and still continues to sell at the time of hitting the record, $57. $57. Initially, it was probably like into the mid-60s, so it wasn't an overly expensive set either. But, of course, Amazon lately has been kind of nudging me. Hey, psst, you want to get this set? And I'm like, I don't know. I already got the Clayface. I already got the Batman. Do I really need a Batwoman? And then, like, Amazon got a little firmer with their request. No, I think you should really get this. Well, far be it for me to argue with Amazon. In the end, though, I did get the set. I mean, it still means I'm going to have myself ultimately another Clayface that, for the first time, I already had a Clayface anyways in my collection. Do I really need another one? The answer apparently to that is yes. Yes, I do. The colors for Clayface, I like the brighter colors made available a little bit more to this mold. All in all, though, a set that set me back around just under $60 works out to be essentially like $20 a figure. Clayface, I don't know what would Clayface have originally sold on his own. In the end, though, it was enough of a nudge that I needed in the right direction to finally pick up the set. A little late on getting the review obviously out for this because this came out maybe like last year. But I still think it was well worth it. It only really needed just to have a markdown price to convince me to add this to my shopping cart. Now, I'm a big fan of Clayface, Duh. I'm sure longtime viewers will already know that I'm a big fan of Mudhead here. While it's not one of the best Clayfaces around, it certainly isn't going to topple one of the best Clayface and one of my favorite figures of all time, the DC Superheroes release of him. He's big, and that's all that really need for a Clayface, with the hopes, though, that down the road McFarlane will release another version of him. He's a little on the more hollow side, but that still was facing the issues with the original release of Clayface when he was sold separately. The thing that's going for him, at least, is a lot more packed color. That if you like the Batman animated series release, for example, of him, the colors, I think, are matching closer to that. Unfortunately, though, while he was going through the assembly line and being painted properly, none of the paint got afforded to the back of his body, so he only really looks good from the front, and he doesn't really look as show-worthy on the back. The articulated mouth is a nice touch, although most of the time I just display Clayface with the mouth closed personally. Then, of course, you got yourself Batman. Now, Batman's good if you missed your chance to get the DC Rebirth release of him, and the colors aren't that different, really. While the first one was released in more of a darker gray, the new Batman gets traded to a lighter gray. One thing, though, I didn't unfortunately mention in this review is the way they've attached the cape. The cape, though, should be a continuation, really, of his cowl, but there's a few little spaces between the cape. You may even be able to see right now. There's a space between his cape and his body that looks jarring. I might even go in there and just try to touch that with a little bit of paint. And of course, the unique figure to this set is Batwoman. Unique at the time of at least doing this review. It's not to say that I'm sure down the road Todd and his team will not release Batwoman on her own, but if you are interested in the character and would like to add her to your shelf, this is the only set to do that right now. Accessory-wise, the both characters of Batman and Batwoman come included with their grapple lines and really weirdly painted batarangs. It's almost like, again, it was sitting on the side table when somebody else was painting something else. And while they were painting the thing that was supposed to be black, inadvertently, some of that may have sprayed, unfortunately, onto the batarangs. It's no harm, no foul. I mean, I'm probably not going to be displaying the figures with them anyways. In the end, though, I've got myself a nice-looking Batman. First time I can now say I've got a Batwoman on my shelf. And I got a Clayface that wasn't really bad in the first place, but he's got some just better paint applied to him. It seems like just as a whole, this set's got a lot more afforded paint. Some of the areas, too, though, that I didn't even ask for, like the batarangs. As it goes right now, at the time of doing this video, the set is still selling on Amazon with a markdown price of $57. So if you are interested and you haven't had the chance to pull the trigger yet on this, Amazon's probably right now your best bet. What do you guys think of this set? Let me know down below in the comments section. Do you feel like there's enough things changed to this that would justify picking this up? If, let's say, you already have the Batman and the Clayface currently in your collection. If you guys also did enjoy this video, you can do it a solid and certainly throw it with a like. If you guys want to stick around for more so, and I certainly hope so, always is the option. You can hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. That's your way of telling YouTube that you want to see more content and you want to be notified every single time a new video posts. And of course, speaking of posting, there's going to always be a lot more videos coming your way, so make sure you're coming back with, of course, your peepers always peeled. Ooh! As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.